Every time you ask an AI to generate a photorealistic image of a cat riding a skateboard on Mars, you are quite literally pouring a bottle of fresh, drinkable water directly onto the ground.
Yeah, right onto the dirt.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are shattering the illusion of the cloud. I mean, we tend to think of artificial intelligence as this weightless, invisible magic. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
You type a prompt, you hit enter, and a brilliantly crafted essay or a stunning piece of art just materializes out of the digital ether.
Right, like magic.
But that ether doesn't exist. The reality is that when you hit enter, you are triggering a massive physical chain reaction. You're consuming local water tables, you're taking up physical space on the Earth, and you're initiating a cascade of complex global regulations that are honestly desperately trying to keep this entire planetary scale machine from going off the rails.
It really is the ultimate optical illusion of the 21st century. I mean, we've completely divorced the digital output from the physical reality.
Yeah.
The cloud isn't made of water vapor. It is constructed from millions of tons of steel, concrete, lithium, and vast, sprawling networks of specialized processors. And those processors run so hot, they require industrial-scale cooling infrastructure.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And that is exactly our mission today. We're going to look under the hood of the AI revolution and understand its hidden realities.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly. The physical footprint, the internal mathematical architecture, and the frantic legal scramble to govern it all. And to do this, we've pulled together an incredibly dense and fascinating stack of sources for you.
Oh, it's a great stack today.
It really is. We're looking at a June 2026 United Nations report on the environmental cost of AI. We're also diving into highly technical internal developer guidelines from both Google and Microsoft.
Which are usually pretty locked down.
Right, totally. We've got MIT Media Lab research on the visual psychology of spotting deepfakes. And finally, we are parsing through the groundbreaking European Union AI Act alongside the 2026 European Education Area Guidelines. Those are the ones trying to help teachers actually apply these laws in, like, a fifth grade classroom.
What makes this specific stack of sources so compelling is how they interlock. We are going to trace the life cycle of an AI model from the physical drain it places on the planet straight into the microscopic mathematical architecture where engineers are fighting bias.
Right.
Then out into the visual interface where AI attempts to deceive human perception. And finally into the courtrooms and schools where society actually has to deal with the fallout.
And the promise to you, the listener, is that by the end of this deep dive, you are going to possess a comprehensive, multi-layered understanding of how this technology actually interfaces with the real world. You won't just know what an AI model is. You will understand the massive physical, ethical, and legal frameworks actively trying to keep it in check.
You'll definitely have a serious edge in understanding where the future of technology is heading.
So let's just jump right in. I want to start with that bottle of water I mentioned.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the physical world.
That is the necessary starting point
Yeah.
because we have to ground this technology in physical reality.
Right.
The source we are relying on here is a June 2026 report from the United Nations University, specifically their Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. The report is titled Environmental Cost of Artificial Intelligence.
Okay.
And the entire central thesis of this document is a paradigm shift. It says that AI is not a software technology. It is a massive material industrial system.
I do want to push back on the premise that this is somehow new or unique to AI, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had server farms for decades. Every time I stream a 4K movie on my television or a financial institution runs its daily transactions, or we just browse the internet, we are using servers that require electricity.
Sure.
What makes AI's physical footprint fundamentally different from the internet infrastructure we've been building since the 1990s?
That is the most common misconception, actually. And it boils down to the fundamental difference between retrieval and generation.
Okay, retrieval versus generation.
Exactly. When you stream that 4K movie, the data center isn't creating the movie. The movie file just sits on a hard drive.
Right, it's just a file.
The server simply locates that file and transmits the packets of data over fiber optic cables to your television. It is a retrieval task. It requires energy to power the router, the switch, and the storage drive, but the computational logic is incredibly simple.
So it's like a digital librarian just grabbing a book off a shelf and handing it to me.
Yes, exactly. But generative AI is doing something fundamentally different. It is not retrieving anything, it is calculating.
So if I ask for an essay on the French Revolution, it's not going into a digital filing cabinet, finding a pre-written essay and handing it to me.
Exactly the opposite. It is synthesizing that essay word by word by calculating the statistical probability of which word should follow the previous word based on hundreds of billions of parameters. It is doing billions of complex mathematical floating point operations just to generate a single sentence. And that is just the inference phase.
Inference phase.
Yeah, that's the moment you actually ask it a question. Before you even get to that point, the model has to go through the training phase.
Oh, right. The training phase is where it ingests the entire internet to learn those patterns in the first place.
Yes. And the sheer scale of compute required for training is staggering. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of specialized processors.
The GPUs, right. Graphics processing units.
Exactly. GPUs running at maximum capacity 24 hours a day for months on end. These chips are incredibly power hungry. When you run a massive cluster of GPUs at full tilt, you are drawing megawatts of electricity.
Right.
And a byproduct of all that electrical resistance in the silicon is heat. Massive, catastrophic amounts of heat.
I mean, if you've ever had a laptop sitting on your knees while playing a heavy video game, you know it gets uncomfortably hot.
Oh yeah, you can practically cook an egg on it.
Now multiply that by a warehouse the size of 3 football fields, filled with nothing but heavy processors.
Right, and if you don't remove that heat, the silicon will literally melt. The servers will destroy themselves.
Wow.
So how do you cool a warehouse full of melting silicon? You use water? Specifically, evaporative cooling towers.
Okay, and this is where the UN report's pillar on the water footprint becomes incredibly alarming.
Exactly. You pump fresh, clean, drinkable water into these cooling systems, expose it to the ambient heat of the servers, and let the water evaporate into the atmosphere, carrying the heat away with it.
And that water is just gone. It's evaporated. It's not like a closed-loop system in a radiator where the same liquid just cycles around forever. You are actively consuming the water supply.
Well, a closed-loop system is possible, but it requires mechanical chillers, which use vastly more electricity.
Oh, I see.
To keep their electricity costs and their carbon emissions down, data centers frequently rely on open-loop evaporative cooling. They are trading water for electricity.
That makes sense.
The UN report notes that training a single large-scale foundational AI model can evaporate millions of gallons of fresh water.
Millions of gallons.
Yeah.
Just for one model.
Yes, and every time you prompt that model, you are evaporating a few more drops.
Which brings me to this concept in the UN report that absolutely fascinated me. It's called footprint decoupling.
Yes, that's a crucial point.
I had never heard this term before.
Yeah.
But it completely changes how we should evaluate corporate greenwashing.
Footprint decoupling is a critical analytical tool. We have this psychological tendency to assume that if a technology is labeled green in one metric, it must be environmentally friendly across the board.
Right.
But the UN points out that low-carbon electricity is not automatically low water or low land. They are decoupled metrics.
So let me put this into a hypothetical scenario to make sure I have my head wrapped around it.
Sure.
Say a massive tech company builds a new AI data center in the desert, maybe somewhere in the American Southwest, and they proudly put out a press release saying, you know, this entire facility is 100% powered by a brand new solar farm. We are completely carbon neutral.
And they wouldn't be lying about the carbon. But let's look at the decoupled metrics. First, the land footprint.
Okay.
To generate enough megawattage to power tens of thousands of GPUs entirely by solar, you need to clear hundreds, perhaps thousands of acres of land. You are disrupting local ecosystems, altering migratory patterns, and permanently changing the landscape.
Right.
That is a massive land footprint, even if the carbon footprint is literally zero.
And then there's the water. If this data center is in the desert where it gets incredibly hot, they need to run those evaporative cooling towers constantly.
Yes, and where do they get the water in a desert? They pull it from the local municipal water supply or pump it from the underground aquifer. So you have a situation where a theoretically green, zero-carbon AI model is actively draining the drinking water supply of a drought-stricken community. The metrics are decoupled. You can optimize for carbon while devastating the local water and land resources.
That is the ultimate out-of-sight, out-of-mind dynamic. The physical burdens are intensely localized, but the digital benefits are totally borderless.
Exactly.
I mean, when I sit in a coffee shop in London and ask an AI to generate a marketing plan, I get the economic benefit of that productivity boost. But the physical cost, the evaporated water, the e-waste of the degraded processors, the mined lithium for the battery backups, that cost is paid by a specific physical community halfway across the world that might not even have access to the AI tool I'm using.
The UN classifies this precisely as an issue of environmental justice. The people absorbing the physical shadow of the AI revolution are rarely the ones reaping its economic rewards.
That's a profound point.
And the report makes a compelling case that as a user, your daily choices actively dictate this consumption. The modality you choose matters immensely.
What do you mean by modality?
Generating a paragraph of text uses a certain amount of compute. Generating a high-resolution, photorealistic image requires an order of magnitude more. Generating a 4-second 4K video requires exponentially more than that.
It's like choosing between riding a bicycle, driving a sedan, or flying a private jet. But because there's no exhaust pipe attached to my laptop, I have absolutely no intuitive sense of the emissions I'm causing.
Which is why the UN report concludes with a demand for transparency and life cycle responsibility. Until we force companies to measure and report the localized water withdrawal and the specific acreage of land disrupted per AI query, we just cannot govern the technology.
You can't manage a physical system if you insist on pretending it's just invisible math.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established that the sheer physical cost of training these models, the vast tracts of land, the millions of gallons of water, the billions of dollars in specialized server farms, creates a massive barrier to entry. Only a handful of hyperscaling megacorporations can actually afford to build the foundational intelligence of the future.
Very true.
But when only 3 or 4 companies control the models that the rest of the planet relies on, a new, arguably more insidious problem emerges. They aren't just centralizing physical resources. They are centralizing human bias.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge issue.
If a model is trained in one specific corporate culture, using the historically prejudiced data of the internet, it's going to regurgitate those prejudices globally.
It absolutely will, and it will do so with the unearned authority of a machine.
So how do we fix that? We have to shift from the physical footprint into the internal microscopic architecture of the models themselves. We are looking at the machine learning guidelines from Google on mitigating bias, paired with Microsoft's responsible AI standard version 2.
Right.
When engineers at these massive companies realize their AI model is biased, say it's consistently rejecting resumes from women, or it fails to recognize faces of certain ethnicities, how do they actually go into the code and fix it?
Well, according to the engineering guidelines, there are generally 2 broad strategies. The first is what we call augmenting the training data. The second is adjusting the optimization or the loss function of the model itself.
Let's explore that first one, because augmenting the data seems like the most obvious, intuitive fix.
Sure.
If I am training an AI to recognize what a successful CEO looks like, and I only feed it historical data, it's mostly going to see white men in suits. So the AI learns, okay, white men in suits equals success. If I want to fix that bias, my immediate thought is just to feed the model a million more examples of successful women and people of color. Just dilute the poison data with better, more representative data.
Conceptually, you are entirely correct. Data augmentation is the ideal first step. If your audit shows a demographic gap, you go out and collect targeted data to balance the scales. But the Google guidelines provide a very stark reality check on this. In practice, gathering more data is frequently impossible.
Impossible why? Is it just too expensive to go out and photograph a million more people?
Cost and time are massive factors, yes. But the bigger hurdle is often legal.
Oh, interesting.
We have strict privacy laws now, like the GDPR in Europe. You cannot just indiscriminately scrape the internet for specific demographic profiles to balance your corporate database. You can't actively target and collect the sensitive personal data just to fix your own.
Because that's a privacy violation.
Exactly. That is often a violation of your privacy rights. Furthermore, even if you report it was legal, there is a deeper philosophical problem. If the new data you collect is generated by the exact same profoundly flawed society that generated it, you haven't fixed it. If you collect a million new loan applications to balance your financial AI, but human loan officers historically approved those loans with a racial bias, feeding those new records into the AI just reinforces the exact same historical prejudice. You are just feeding the model more of the same bias, just in a higher volume.
Okay, that makes total sense. If the well itself is poisoned, fetching more water doesn't help. So, if you can't just throw better data at the problem, you have to use the second strategy, adjusting the internal math. The Google documentation talks about altering the optimization or the loss function. I really need you to translate this because it sounds incredibly dense.
You can break this down conceptually. You have to understand how an AI actually learns. It doesn't memorize facts. It makes probabilistic guesses.
Okay.
During the training phase, you give the AI a task, let's say predicting whether a student will graduate based on their grades and attendance. The AI makes a guess. If it guesses wrong, a mathematical formula called a loss function calculates a penalty score.
Okay, I follow. The AI makes a mistake, and the loss function hands it a demerit.
Exactly. And the entire architecture of the AI, its sole purpose for existing, is to continually adjust its internal wiring, tweaking billions of little digital dials until that penalty score gets as close to zero as possible.
Wow.
It learns through relentless trial and error, driven by the fear of the loss function's penalty. Now, here's the problem. A standard out-of-the-box loss function is blind to demographics. It just penalizes any incorrect guess equally.
Why is that a problem? Shouldn't equality be the goal?
Equality of penalty sounds good, but if your training data has 90% male profiles and 10% female profiles, the AI realizes very quickly that it can get a lower overall penalty score by just heavily optimizing for the majority group.
Oh, wow.
It essentially decides, if I just get really good at predicting the men, I'll ace the test, and it doesn't matter if I fail the women because they are only 10% of my grade.
It takes the path of least mathematical resistance. It sacrifices the minority group to get a better overall score.
Precisely. So to fix this, engineers literally swap out the standard loss function for a fairness-aware optimization function. They rewrite the rules of the test.
Okay.
The Google documentation highlights two very specific mathematical techniques for doing this: MindIf and counterfactual logic pairing.
Let's tackle MindIf first.
Yeah.
Minimum difference. How does it change the rules?
MindIf operates at the group level. Its goal is to force the model to balance its error rates across different demographic slices. Let's stick with the student graduation predictor.
Sure.
Let's say a standard AI model has a 5% error rate when predicting outcomes for male and female students, but it has a 15% error rate when predicting outcomes for non-binary students, simply because it had less historical data on them.
Right. So the model optimized for the majority.
Right. So engineers apply MindIf. They add a new term to the loss function equation. Now, the AI isn't just penalized for being wrong overall. It is hit with a massive secondary mathematical penalty specifically calculated based on the divergence between those error rates.
It's penalizing the gap.
Yes. The AI tries its old trick. It optimizes for the majority. But suddenly, because the error rate for non-binary students is 10 points higher, the MindIf function slaps it with a huge penalty.
Oh, I see.
The AI realizes, wait, I can't get a good score just by getting the majority right anymore. I am mathematically forced to care about demographic equality. It will actually sacrifice a little bit of its overall accuracy to ensure that its predictive performance is equal across all designated groups.
That is brilliant. It forces the AI to care about the minority data, not because the AI has a conscience, but because you've rigged the math so it can't win otherwise.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's MindIf, which looks at whole groups. What is the second technique? Counterfactual logic pairing.
Counterfactual logic pairing, or CLP, is even more fascinating because it operates on the individual level, not the group level. A counterfactual is a what-if scenario.
Yep.
CLP looks at an individual piece of data, like a single resume, and it asks the AI to make a prediction. Let's say the AI predicts this candidate has an 80% chance of being a good hire.
Okay, so the AI likes the resume.
Then, the CLP system takes that exact same resume, and it changes only one sensitive attribute. It swaps the gender from male to female. Or it changes the name at the top to one statistically associated with a different race. Everything else, the GPA, the work experience, the skills, remains mathematically identical. It then feeds this counterfactual resume back to the AI.
Logically, if the skills and experience are identical, the AI should still output an 80% chance of a good hire.
Exactly. But if the model has internalized societal bias, it might output a 70% chance for the female counterfactual resume. This is where CLP brings the hammer down.
Wow.
During training, CLP compares the output probabilities of those two paired examples. If there is any divergence between the prediction for the original profile and the counterfactual profile, the loss function triggers a massive penalty.
So you are basically training the AI through side-by-side comparison. You're saying, look at these two identical profiles. You give me a different answer just because I changed the gender, you fail the test.
Yes. You are mathematically forcing the neural network to adjust its internal weights until it is entirely blind to that sensitive attribute when calculating its final output.
That's amazing.
The AI learns that relying on race or gender as a shortcut for its prediction is a guaranteed way to trigger a penalty, so it stops doing it.
I love this because it brings to mind a classroom analogy. Let's say the AI is a student, and the historical data is the reading material in the school library. Augmenting the data is like the school board buying a wider, more diverse variety of textbooks. It's a great step, but maybe the budget gets cut, or those new books just aren't available.
The data augmentation strategy hits a wall.
Right. But mind-if and counterfactual logic pairing, that is like changing the teacher's grading rubric. You are mathematically forcing the teacher to grade fairly, penalizing them if they show favoritism, regardless of which biased textbooks the student happened to read in the library.
That is a perfect synthesis of the engineering. And what's crucial is that this internal mathematical engineering aligns perfectly with the corporate policy side, which we see in the Microsoft Responsible AI standard.
How does Microsoft enforce this at a corporate level? Because you can have the math, but someone has to actually decide to use it.
Microsoft's standard is essentially an internal legal framework. They mandate that before a line of code is written, product teams must perform an impact assessment. They have to define if their software qualifies as a sensitive use.
What defines a sensitive use?
Any system that could have a consequential impact on a person's legal position or life opportunities. If an AI is sorting resumes, approving loans, allocating medical resources, or analyzing biometric data, it is a sensitive use.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground.
It does. If a project triggers that classification, the engineering team is required by corporate policy to document the prioritized demographic groups, evaluate the data sets, and explicitly define what they call responsible release criteria.
Meaning they have to prove the math works before they ship the product.
Exactly. They have to set target maximums for the acceptable performance differences between demographic groups. If the mind-if algorithms haven't gotten the error gap below that specific threshold, the product manager is simply not allowed to release the software to the public.
So we can force an AI to be mathematically fair when its core objective is to be helpful. We can rigorously penalize it for accidental bias. But this leads us to a much darker side of the technology.
Yeah, a whole other beast.
What happens when these incredibly powerful, perfectly optimized models are actively designed to deceive us? We have to shift our focus from accidental harm to intentional, malicious manipulation.
We have to talk about the visual physics of deepfakes.
Yes. For this, we are diving into research from the MIT Media Lab, specifically their Detect Deepfakes project. And the context for this is vital. This project actually grew out of the Kaggle Deepfake Detection Challenge, which is a massive initiative where tech giants like Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon put up $1 million prize pool.
They essentially crowdsourced the problem. They released a massive data set of thousands of manipulated videos and challenged the world's best data scientists to build an automated software algorithm that could reliably detect if a video was a deepfake.
And the results were, not great, right?
They were illuminating but ultimately pessimistic. The winning algorithm only achieved about 65% accuracy on unseen data.
Wow. That's barely better than a coin flip.
It proved that relying entirely on a software silver bullet to detect deepfakes is a losing battle. It is a perpetual cat-and-mouse game. The moment an automated detection system learns how to spot a specific digital artifact, the people building the deepfakes use that exact same detection system as a new loss function to train their model to erase that specific artifact.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So if the software learns to spot blurry edges, the deepfake generator gets penalized for blurry edges, and the next version of the deepfake has perfect edges. The detector actually makes the virus stronger.
Precisely. Which is why the MIT Media Lab took a completely different, almost sociological approach. They decided that since the software will always be locked in an arms race, we have to patch the human being.
Patch the human being. I like that.
We need to train human visual perception to spot the failures of the AI. They analyzed thousands of deepfakes and categorized the specific recurring visual tells where the AI's logic breaks down.
They published 8 specific things to look for. And reviewing these is fascinating because it's not just a checklist, it's a masterclass in how AI fundamentally misunderstands the physical universe. I want to group these 8 tells into some broader themes.
Okay.
Let's start with the first theme, the 3D geometry problem. MIT says to look closely at shadows, and specifically, glasses glare. Why does AI fail so badly at rendering a pair of glasses?
To understand why it fails, you have to understand how it generates the image. A human 3D animator builds a digital environment. They create a 3D sphere, they assign a light source in the corner of the room, and the computer calculates exactly how that light ray bounces off the curved surface of the sphere and hits the camera lens. It simulates physics.
Okay.
Generative AI does not simulate
It's
physics.
just predicting pixels.
Exactly. It's a statistical pattern matcher working in 2D space. When it generates a face wearing glasses, it doesn't know that glasses are two curved pieces of reflective glass sitting 1 inch in front of a three-dimensional human face. It just knows that in its training data, pictures of glasses often have a cluster of bright white pixels on them, which represent glare.
So it just paints some white pixels on the lens.
Yes. But when the person in the deepfake video turns their head, the AI doesn't know how to move that glare dynamically in relation to the light source. So the glare might stay unnaturally frozen in the exact same spot on the lens, or it might slide off the glasses entirely and float in midair, or it might just flicker out of existence.
Oh, wow. That's such a good thing to look out for.
The AI cannot maintain geometric consistency in motion.
That perfectly explains the shadow problem, too. If the AI doesn't know where the sun is in the 3D space, it might generate a shadow on the left side of the nose, but put the shadow on the right side of the cheekbone. The lighting just doesn't agree with itself.
Precisely. It is a 2D statistical guess, trying to mimic a 3D physical reality.
Okay, the second theme from the MIT research I would call the biological congruency problem. They point out that we should check the smoothness of the cheeks and forehead, check the borders of facial hair, and scrutinize moles. What is the AI failing to grasp about human biology?
It fails to grasp the holistic aging process and the microscopic texture of humanity. Deepfakes are highly resource-intensive to run. To save compute power, attackers almost never fake an entire body. They take existing footage of a real actor, map the target's face, and graft it onto the actor's head.
Like a digital mask.
Exactly, but the masking process often struggles with the borders. Look at the cheeks. The AI might be incredibly good at generating flawless airbrush skin on the center of the face, making the person look 25 years old.
Right.
But it forgets to alter the 60-year-old neck of the original actor underneath, or the graying hair at the temples. The dimensions of age clash abruptly at the jawline.
And what about moles or facial hair? Why are those tells?
Because of texture and depth. A real mole isn't just a flat brown hex code painted on the skin. It has three-dimensional depth, slight variations in pigment, and it interacts with the light. The AI often renders a mole as a perfectly flat, featureless dot.
So interesting.
Facial hair is even harder. A beard is composed of thousands of individual, fine strands of hair that overlap, cast microshadows on the skin, and move independently when the jaw moves. The AI simply cannot resolve that level of fine detail, so the border where a beard meets the cheek often looks blurry, smudged, or painted on. It lacks biological texture.
This leads to the final theme, the motion problem, blinking and lip syncing. Early deepfakes were famous for never blinking. Why was that such a blind spot?
It was a bias in the training data. The early models were trained largely on publicly available photographs of celebrities and politicians. When do photographers take pictures?
Right, when they're posing?
When the person is smiling, looking at the camera with their eyes wide open, you delete the photos where the person is blinking. So the AI literally didn't know that humans blinked.
It just assumed we stared unblinkingly at all times.
Right. Now, the models have corrected for this, but they still struggle with the natural, unconscious rhythm of the biological blink, especially how it changes cadence when a person is speaking or thinking. Speaking of which, lip sync is arguably the hardest thing for AI to master, specifically regarding plosive sounds.
Plosive sounds like P, B, and M.
Exactly. Try making a P sound without physically compressing your lips together. You can't. It requires physical pressure and release.
Right, you have to close your mouth.
When a deepfake takes a video of someone saying hello and artificially manipulates the audio to make them say potato, the AI has to redraw the mouth. But it frequently fails to fully close the lips for that plosive P, resulting in a visual mushiness where the audio says P but the mouth is slightly open. The physics of sound production just don't match the visual output.
This is a brilliant toolkit for surviving the modern internet, but it brings up a terrifying concept mentioned in the Microsoft standards. Automation bias.
Automation bias is the psychological Achilles heel of humanity in the digital age. It is our innate, almost subconscious tendency to blindly trust whatever output a machine gives us.
Go for sure.
If a human tells us something surprising, we're skeptical. If a highly complex computer system presents us with a diagnostic report or a photorealistic video, our brains default to assuming it is objective, calculated, and true.
We lower our critical defenses because we assume the machine is smarter than we are.
Yes. And when you combine automation bias with highly convincing deepfakes, the results are catastrophic. This is why Microsoft mandates that systems must explicitly inform users when they are interacting with an AI, and why watermarking generated content is becoming a massive industry focus. We have to artificially break the automation bias by constantly reminding the human, hey, this is not real.
But reminding someone isn't always enough, especially in high-stakes environments. The sources reference a researcher from a university in Chennai, India, who focuses on automation in healthcare. Her work perfectly illustrates why we can't just let the machines run unsupervised, even if they are highly accurate.
Right. Her focus is on the human-in-the-loop architecture. In a healthcare setting, an AI might be able to analyze an MRI scan and diagnose a tumor faster and sometimes more accurately than a tired radiologist.
Yeah.
But you absolutely cannot allow the AI to automatically diagnose the patient and dispatch a prescription without human intervention.
Because if the AI hallucinates or misinterprets a shadow on the scan as a tumor, the consequences are fatal.
Exactly. The human-in-the-loop protocol legally and ethically mandates that the AI is only a tool for recommendation. A highly trained human doctor must review the AI's logic, check for errors, contextualize the finding with the patient's holistic medical history, and take personal legal responsibility for the final decision. The human is the ultimate firewall against automation bias.
I completely agree with the human-in-the-loop concept for a hospital. But let's zoom out to society at large. We can't rely entirely on individuals sitting at home, carefully counting the blinks of a politician on a screen, or meticulously checking the glasses glare in every viral video to save democracy from mass manipulation.
No, you really can't.
The scale of the deception is simply too massive for individual vigilance. 100 million people might see a deepfake before the first person successfully debunks it.
You are identifying the exact breaking point of individual responsibility. You cannot put the burden of verifying reality entirely on the end user.
Which brings us to the heavy hitter of this deep dive. We can't just rely on Google engineers tweaking the math, and we can't just rely on citizens checking for blurry beards. This is exactly why governments are finally stepping in to draw hard, non-negotiable lines in the sand. We need to talk about the European Union AI Act.
This is the most consequential piece of technology legislation since the GDPR. It is the world's first comprehensive, binding legal framework for artificial intelligence. And because of the size of the European market, it is going to dictate the global standard.
Oh, absolutely.
The compliance timelines are rolling out incrementally over the next 6 months, meaning this isn't a future theoretical debate. This is restructuring the tech industry right now.
The structural philosophy of the AI Act is brilliant. They didn't try to regulate the technology itself because the technology changes every week.
Yeah.
They regulated the risk. I'd liken it to city zoning laws. If you want to build a small wooden tool shed in your backyard, the city doesn't really care. You need minimal paperwork. That's a minimal risk system, like a spam filter or an AI video game character. If you want to open a commercial restaurant, the city cares a lot. You need health inspections, fire exits, and permits. That's a high-risk system. Yeah. But under no circumstances, regardless of how many permits you apply for, are you allowed to build a toxic waste incinerator next to an elementary school. That is unacceptable risk, and it is banned outright.
That analogy captures the essence of the act perfectly.
Right.
The EU adopted a strict four-tiered pyramid of risk. Start at the very top of that pyramid, the toxic waste incinerators, the unacceptable risk category.
Right.
These are specific AI practices that the European Union has determined are a direct threat to the fundamental rights of citizens, and they are permanently banned.
Okay, let's go deep into this. What exactly is on the banned list and why?
The first major ban is on subliminal manipulation. You cannot deploy an AI system that utilizes techniques below a person's threshold of consciousness to materially distort their behavior in a way that causes physical or psychological harm.
Give me an example of what that actually looks like.
Imagine an AI integrated into a social media feed or a virtual reality headset that subtly flashes imperceptible images or continuously slightly alters the audio frequencies, specifically designed to induce a state of anxiety or susceptibility right before presenting you with an advertisement or a political message.
Wow.
That intentional subconscious manipulation of human autonomy is illegal.
It's essentially banning digital mind control. What else?
They ban the exploitation of vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
An AI cannot be designed to exploit the specific vulnerabilities of a person based on their age, disability, or socioeconomic situation to distort their behavior.
So if a payday loan company builds an AI that scours social media to identify individuals who are demonstrating signs of severe financial distress or gambling addiction, and then micro-targets them with predatory loan advertisements at 2 a.m. when their impulse control is lowest, that is banned.
Completely banned. It is an exploitation of a protected vulnerability. Next on the banned list is social scoring. The state or private actors acting on behalf of the state cannot use AI to evaluate or classify the trustworthiness of individuals based on their social behavior or personality characteristics, which leads to detrimental treatment in unrelated contexts.
Okay, so no dystopian overarching citizen scores where jaywalking prevents you from getting a mortgage or buying a train ticket. Good. What about the workplace? You mentioned earlier something about emotion inference.
Yes. The EU has banned the use of AI systems to infer the emotions of individuals in the areas of the workplace and educational institutions. Yeah, an employer cannot mandate that you keep your webcam on, so an AI can scan your facial microexpressions and classify whether you are engaged, bored, or frustrated during your shift.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If I am running a company and I am paying a remote workforce by the hour, why shouldn't I be allowed to use software to ensure they're actually paying attention to the client meeting as opposed to secretly watching YouTube on a second monitor? Isn't that just modern management?
The EU's counterargument is based on fundamental human rights, specifically the right to privacy and human dignity. An employer has the right to monitor the output of your work, but they do not have the right to biologically surveil your internal emotional state.
Oh, that makes sense.
Furthermore, the EU argues that emotion recognition AI is scientifically dubious. It frequently misinterprets cultural differences, neurodivergence, or simple physical fatigue as disengagement, leading to algorithmic discrimination. The potential for abuse far outweighs the management utility.
That makes total sense. You can measure my sales numbers, but you can't measure my soul. What else is banned?
Untargeted facial scraping. Companies cannot build facial recognition databases by indiscriminately scraping millions of images from the internet or hacking into public CCTV footage. They also banned predictive policing based purely on profiling. Law enforcement cannot use an algorithm to analyze your personality traits and declare, this individual has an 82% probability of committing a crime next month, arrest them.
Total Minority Report stuff. Now, this brings us to what was arguably the single most controversial, heavily debated aspect of the entire unacceptable risk tier: real-time remote biometric identification, or RBI.
Yes, that was a huge debate.
This is live facial recognition used by police in public spaces. Privacy advocates wanted a total, absolute ban. Law enforcement agencies argued it was essential for modern security. How did the final text of the act actually resolve this? We need to look at this very impartially.
The final legislation attempts to thread a highly complex legal and ethical needle. The baseline rule is that real-time RBI in public spaces is banned. However, law enforcement carved out 3 very specific, narrow exceptions where it is permitted, but only if it is strictly necessary to achieve a vital public interest.
With the 3 exceptions.
Exception 1. The targeted search for specific victims of abduction, trafficking, or sexual exploitation, and searching for missing persons.
Okay.
Exception 2. The prevention of a specific substantial and imminent threat to life or physical safety, such as a foreseeable and imminent terrorist attack.
Makes sense.
Exception 3. The localization or identification of a person suspected of committing a specific serious criminal offense.
How does the EU define a serious criminal offense, though? Because jaywalking is technically an offense.
It is explicitly defined and limited to crimes punishable by a custodial sentence of at least 4 years. We are talking about murder, rape, armed robbery, kidnapping, and organized crime.
Okay, but even if a situation perfectly fits one of those 3 exceptions, let's say there is a credible threat of a terror attack at a major train station. The police can't just flip a switch and turn on the facial recognition grid, right?
Yeah.
What is the actual mechanism of enforcement?
The procedural safeguards are immense. Before deploying the system, law enforcement must complete a fundamental rights impact assessment and register the specific use case in a secure EU database. Most importantly, they must obtain prior authorization from a judicial authority or an independent administrative body. A judge has to sign off on the warrant, confirming that the use is necessary and proportionate.
But wait, if it's an imminent threat, like an active shooter, police don't have time to wait for a judge to review paperwork.
The EU recognized that operational reality. In a situation of duly justified urgency, law enforcement can deploy the facial recognition system immediately. However, they are legally required to request the judicial authorization within 24 hours of turning it on.
Oh, I see.
If, upon review, the judge denies the authorization, the police must immediately cease the use of the system and instantly delete all data and video footage acquired during that time.
It is a massive restriction on the state's power, but it is not the blanket ban that privacy groups wanted. It's a highly regulated loophole. Okay, so that covers the banned practices. Let's move down one tier on the pyramid to the high-risk category. This is the restaurant that needs health inspections. What qualifies as high risk, and what is the compliance burden?
High-risk systems are AI applications that don't violate fundamental rights by their very nature, but have a high potential to cause significant harm to a person's health, safety, or life prospects if they malfunction or operate with bias. The Act provides a definitive list of these under Annex 3.
Give me the highlights of Annex 3. Where is the AI touching our lives that requires this level of regulation?
Critical infrastructure is a major one. AI systems managing the supply of water, gas, electricity, or managing road traffic. If those fail, cities shut down. Education and vocational training is another. Using AI to determine who gets admitted to a university, or AI used to evaluate learning outcomes and grade exams.
Employment recruiting has to be on there too, right? We talked about that with the Google bias guidelines.
It is heavily regulated. Any AI used for the recruitment or selection of natural person sorting resumes, placing targeted job advertisements, or evaluating candidates during an interview is high risk. Also, AI used by managers to make decisions on promotions or terminations. Furthermore, AI used by public authorities to assess whether a citizen is eligible for welfare benefits, housing assistance, or health care.
If an algorithm is deciding if I get a job or if I get my unemployment check, it's high risk. So if a company in Paris wants to build and sell a resume sorting AI, what do they legally have to do to comply with the act?
The compliance burden is immense, which is why critics argue it will stifle European startup innovation, while proponents argue it ensures European software will be the safest in the world. Before putting a high-risk system on the market, the provider must establish a comprehensive, documented risk management system that covers the entire life cycle of the product. They must prove exceptionally high-quality data governance.
Meaning they have to prove their training data isn't biased, just like the Google guidelines demanded.
Exactly. They have to legally guarantee that their data sets are relevant, representative, and free of errors to mitigate discrimination. They must draw up exhaustive technical documentation that explains the model's architecture. The system must be designed to automatically generate logs keeping a digital paper trail of every decision it makes for auditing purposes.
Wow, that's a lot of paperwork.
It must have high levels of cybersecurity. And crucially, circling back to our Chennai researcher, the system must be designed in a way that allows for effective human oversight.
The human in the loop is a legal requirement.
For high-risk systems, yes. The AI cannot be a completely closed, autonomous black box.
That's like a monumental regulatory effort. But there was one final category in the EU AI Act that I want to touch on because it was frantically added late in the drafting process. When they started writing this law, they were thinking about specific AI tools, an AI that sorts resumes, an AI that predicts traffic. But then ChatGPT exploded onto the scene, and suddenly we had these massive foundational models that were built for one specific task.
Right, the game changed overnight.
They could write code, pass the bar exam, generate poetry, and translate languages. How does the EU handle general-purpose AI, or GPAI?
The emergence of foundational models fundamentally disrupted the EU's risk tier philosophy because a general-purpose AI isn't inherently high risk or low risk. It depends entirely on how the end user prompts it. So the EU created a parallel regulatory track specifically for GPAI. They divided it based on scale. All providers of general-purpose AI models, regardless of size, must adhere to transparency requirements. They have to maintain technical documentation, explicitly respect EU copyright laws regarding their training data, and publish a sufficiently detailed summary of the content they use to train the model.
Meaning they can't just secretly scrape copyrighted books and news articles without disclosing it.
Yeah.
But there's a subcategory for the truly massive models, right?
Right.
The models that pose a systemic risk.
Yes. The EU had to figure out how to mathematically define what makes a model a systemic risk to society. They settled on a threshold based on raw computational power. If the cumulative amount of compute used to train a foundational model exceeds 10 to the 25th power floating point operations, or FLOPs, it is automatically classified as presenting a systemic risk.
I need to pause here because that number is incomprehensible.
Hmm.
10 to the 25th power FLOPs. That is a 1 followed by 25 zeros. A floating point operation is basically a single mathematical equation, right? Like 2.5 plus 3.7.
Exactly. It's a basic calculation.
Right? So the EU is saying that if your model required 10 septillion mathematical calculations just to train its neural network, it is so massive, so complex, and so capable of emergent, unpredictable behaviors that it represents a systemic threat to the European Union.
Yes.
That threshold essentially means only the absolute largest models built by the richest, hyper-scaling tech giants, the ones evaporating millions of gallons of water fall into this tier.
That is correct. It targets the titans of the industry. And if a model crosses that 10 to the 25th FLOP threshold, the provider faces extreme regulatory scrutiny. They are legally required to conduct standardized independent model evaluations. They must perform extensive adversarial testing.
Adversarial testing is red teaming, right? Hiring internal hackers to try and break the model's safety guardrails before it launches, trying to trick the AI into providing instructions for a bioweapon, or generating deepfake propaganda to see if the safety filters hold.
Precisely. They have to document the results of that red teaming. Furthermore, they are required to continuously track, document, and report any serious incidents or malfunctions directly to the newly established EU AI office. They must also ensure state-of-the-art cybersecurity protections to prevent foreign adversaries from stealing the model's weights.
Having a massive 300-page legal text drafted in Brussels, complete with FLOP calculations and Annex 3 designations, is an incredible geopolitical achievement. It's the Brussels effect in action. If you want to sell your AI in Europe, you have to play by European rules, which effectively changes global corporate behavior.
It does.
But how does this abstract legal text actually trickle down to the everyday people who have to deal with AI's impact on human development? How does a normal person navigate this?
This brings us perfectly to our final source, and it is where the rubber truly meets the road. We are looking at the European Education Area's 2026 guidelines on the ethical use of artificial intelligence and data in teaching and learning.
Right, because lawmakers in Brussels are drafting the theory, but teachers are on the absolute chaotic front lines of this revolution. They were dealing with classrooms full of students who suddenly have access to an oracle in their pockets.
Yeah, it's wild for them.
Students using AI to write their history essays, to instantly translate their language homework, to summarize classic literature so they don't have to read the book. The cognitive offloading is unprecedented.
And you cannot expect a fifth-grade history teacher who is already overworked to read the entirety of the EU AI Act, understand the statistical nuances of counterfactual logic pairing, or calculate the water footprint of their students' prompts. But that teacher desperately needs to know how to handle these tools ethically and effectively in their classroom today.
These guidelines, which are Action 6 of the EU's Digital Education Action Plan, act as a vital bridge. They take the incredibly dense legalities of the AI Act and data privacy laws like GDPR, and they translate them into practical, actionable rubrics for educators.
Exactly. The guidelines strip away the dense legalese. They provide simple glossaries explaining what a deepfake is or what algorithmic bias looks like in practice. They offer concrete scenarios for evaluating educational technology.
Give me an example of a classroom scenario.
Suppose a school district wants to purchase an AI tutoring software to help students with math. The guidelines provide a checklist for the teacher or principal. They prompt questions like, does this software vendor clearly explain what data it collects from the students?
Good question.
Has the system been tested for bias to ensure it doesn't unfairly penalize students who speak with a regional dialect or have a learning disability? Does the teacher have the final say in the student's grade, maintaining the human in the loop, or does the AI automatically fail the student without review?
It's building ethical AI literacy at the grassroots level. It's empowering the teacher to look at this seemingly magical technology and say, no, this is a tool, and we're going to evaluate it critically.
It shifts the dynamic from fear to informed agency. It helps educators leverage the incredible benefits of AI like personalized tutoring or instant feedback while safely navigating the risks of bias and data exploitation.
Synthesizing all of this, it really brings the entire deep dive full circle in a profound way. We started by looking at the massive, invisible physical footprint of these systems, the data centers draining local aquifers and clearing land just to generate the compute.
Yeah, the real-world impact.
Then we zoomed into the microscopic code, looking at how engineers at massive tech companies are trying to mathematically force fairness into their models with tools like MindIff, because gathering unbiased data is impossible. We looked at the visual physics of how AI tries to deceive us with deepfakes and how human perception can be trained to spot the shadows and the glare. Then we zoomed all the way out to see regulators in Brussels trying to contain the chaos with a massive tiered legal framework. But ultimately, it is the teachers, the doctors, the HR managers, and the everyday citizens who are left to help humans navigate the messy, on-the-ground reality of living with these systems.
It highlights that technology is never isolated. It is a deeply interconnected global web. An algorithm trained in a massive, water-cooled data center in the American Southwest can be prompted by a user in Asia, generating a biased output that affects a student in a classroom in Germany, all while being regulated by laws drafted in Brussels. The physical, the algorithmic, and the legal are inextricably linked.
They really are. Okay, let's briefly summarize the incredible journey we've been on today. We started by revealing the hidden physical cost of the cloud, proving that generative AI is a massive material system that consumes land and evaporates water at an astonishing scale. We moved into the mathematical battles fighting inside the neural networks, learning how engineers use counterfactuals and loss functions to penalize algorithms for human prejudice. We exposed the biological and physical blind spots of deepfakes, learning why AI struggles to understand 3D lighting or the texture of a human blink. And finally, we unpacked the sweeping legislative attempt of the EU to categorize and control this technology based on its risk to our fundamental rights.
It is a massive amount of information to process, but understanding these layers from the cooling towers to the courtroom is the only way to truly grasp what the AI revolution actually represents.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. We spent a lot of time analyzing how the EU AI Act sets strict rules for systemic risk models, the ones crossing that 10 to the 25th FLOP threshold. But the digital internet is entirely borderless. Imagine a hyper-advanced systemic risk AI model built entirely in a sovereign country that explicitly ignores the EU AI Act or actively operates in opposition to it.
That's a scary thought.
Imagine this model is trained on completely biased, unregulated, poisoned data. Imagine it is powered by environmentally devastating data centers with zero transparency regarding their water or carbon footprint. But, through the frictionless nature of the internet, it is accessed daily by millions of users worldwide through an innocuous little chat app on their phones. When the digital output flows freely across borders, but the physical environmental damage, the algorithmic bias, and the social harms are highly localized in specific communities, who actually has the legal or physical power to pull the plug?
That tension between borderless digital capabilities and localized physical consequences is without a doubt the defining geopolitical question of the next decade.
It truly is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope that the next time you open a chatbot, generate an image, or watch a viral video, you view that simple interaction through this newly informed, multi-layered lens. You are now officially well informed. Until next time.